We just got a longer extension cord because these ones decided to go off. So let's plug this in. So everything's going wrong. My phone ran out of storage, so that's wonderful. And all of this stuff is just not happening great, but it's okay. It's fine. So, hey everybody, and welcome to I'm Apostolic Not Confused. Today I have Ava here, and she's going to share a little bit of her testimony, and then I'm going to ask some questions, and we're just going to talk. So, all right, let's get started.
I'm Apostolic, Not Confused. Real talk for apostolic teens with Jayla Dixon.
Okay, so today Ava is going to be telling us about her testimony and what God has brought her out of. So let's get started.
Okay, so it started off when I was small. I was like 5. My parents got divorced, and for a while, honestly, it didn't even really affect me. But he was an alcoholic. That came later. But he was a drug addict and basically chose drugs over me and over everything. There was a lot of drama surrounding that. I mean, when I was 9, we didn't talk before that, and then we had like little visits, and he basically used my words against me, said I said things that I didn't, and some of those things were like that I was being sex trafficked and raped and just horrible, horrible things which were not true. So that kind of affected me because I was like, dude, you're supposed to be my dad, not say that I said things that I didn't do. And then, let me think. I was about 13. No, I was like 12 or 13, and my mom was an alcoholic. She was addicted to alcohol for like a year and a half maybe. And for most of that, or I'd say about half of that, we lived with my grandma, and we just lived there. And then finally we got kicked out because we were living there for too long. And sorry.
No, you're fine.
Anyways, we got kicked out. And then we got our own place. She was still an alcoholic. She had like 9-to-5 job, but she just basically lived off of alcohol. And I remember like it was hard for me because she'd get into arguments with me and just yell at me and just do really bad things, I guess you could say, to summarize it. And then she wouldn't remember it. And then she'd be like all sad about it in the morning and sad about it, and then she'd just go back to doing the same thing again. I did go to therapy at this time, so that really helped. But, it was really hard having to ask my mom, can you please not drink tonight? And can we just have a girls' night? And then I'd smell alcohol in her breath, and, it just kind of brought the mood down. Then I was 13. I think I just turned 13. 12 to 13. I was really depressed. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. In 8th grade, all my friends left me because of a stupid rumor. That's why I hate gossip so much, because there was a stupid rumor that I was trying to make my best friend's boyfriend break up with her for me. Turns out he was the one that started that rumor, and we were friends. We were friends before they were even together, and he's the one that started it, and then was acting all innocent to me, and then nobody really believed me because I wasn't popular. They believed my friend because she was, because that's how 8th grade works,
Exactly.
So, I lost all my friends. I was depressed and anxious all the time. And so my aunt, who is an adult, I'm not going to say who, but she introduced me to weed. And so I started smoking weed because she told me, she's like, yeah, it cured my anxiety and depression right away. Like, it'll totally work for you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. It does not cure your depression. It makes it worse. So yeah, I was smoking for about a year, and about 3 months at the end is when I was trying to stop, and I really couldn't. Like, I would go maybe 5 days without it, and then I'd smoke again and relapse, and it was really hard for me. But God delivered me out of that, and so I'll get into that later, but That's all I'll say. And that's not my whole testimony. There's a lot of in between, but that's just kind of the gist of my past.
Okay. So I can cut this part out. We're really doing
it's 3111.
Okay. Okay, so for the first question, what do you think kept you going during the hardest moment? Was there a verse, a song, or something that helped you hold on?
For me, in my hardest moments, I was really lost. I knew about God, but I wasn't going to church. So before that, I had my boyfriend. And I know that sounds really cliche and like, oh, my boyfriend. Blah, blah, blah. It's not that. Like, he was honestly my only friend when I had no friends. And I didn't really have my family because we had just moved out, got kicked out. I didn't have my mom. She was an alcoholic. I didn't have my dad. I didn't really have a secure support system, and so he was really that for me, and he really helped me with that. In the end, we had to break up because he was basically just bringing me down in the end. But at the beginning, he was uplifting me in my hard times. And then when I actually went to church, God truly helped me. Even though, yes, I was still addicted for a long time going to church. I was still, I'd go home from church and I'd smoke weed, but God still really, his grace and his mercy was so great for me in that time because he really helped me get through a lot of things. I would say it was obviously a lot better when I actually gave up weed, but he still, like I said, his grace and mercy really helped me through that.
Okay. The second question is, when did it hit you that God was really working in your life? And was there a specific moment where you felt like, okay, God is here, God is real, and God sees me?
Yes, there definitely is. I went to senior camp with my cousin, and I actually really, at first, didn't want to go. And at this time, my mom was no longer an alcoholic, so that, praise Lord. But, so I really knew I'd miss my mom. I get really homesick.
Yeah.
So I didn't really want to go. But finally, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. Now I know God really knew I needed to go, but... So I actually went, and when I was there, I just felt such an overwhelming, peace.
Okay. You want to restart the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the second question is, what was the turning point? Nope. Okay. The second question is, when did it hit you that God was really working in your life? Was there a moment that you felt like, yes, I know God is real, he's working, and I can see him here with me?
Yes, so it was definitely when I went to senior camp. I originally did not want to go because, again, my mom was not an alcoholic at this time. She had given up alcohol, but I get really homesick, and so I didn't really want to go because this was the first time I would spend 2 weeks apart from my mom in a really long time, so I didn't want to go, and now I know that it was God that really knew I needed to be there, so, I went to senior camp, and I was depressed and addicted at this point, and I honestly felt such an overwhelming, sense of peace and joy, and I realized I didn't need weed. I didn't need these worldly things to feel happy anymore. That wasn't even making me feel happy.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I realized that, God is actually, he's real, and, all the things that they preached about, and I had been going to my church now. Love that church. Love my church. For maybe 6 months by now, maybe a little bit less. But and I finally realized they're not joking when they say that. It's not there's no other way to find God and to live for God. You truly need to do the steps. You need to step up in your life.
Yeah.
And so God's joy and peace really helped me there. That really delivered me. And so I went home, and I smoked one time, and that was the night that I got home, and then I never picked it up again. And it was still hard. I still wanted to. That temptation is still there, but I didn't feel like I needed to anymore. For a while, it was my escape from depression and anxiety and all the things that the devil was telling me that I was, and now I realize God's my escape,
Exactly.
So, it was definitely senior camp.
That's good. What was the turning point for you? The moment where things started to shift and you really began to grow? I think that's kind of what you just covered.
Yeah.
I have to agree. I think that's why camps are so important, and things where you can go and see other young people
who believe the same thing as you. And I think my cousin, she always laughs because she's like, yeah, the first time I ever went to senior camp or like a camp, she was like, wow, there's other people who believe like us. Like, we're not all by ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a powerful thing. And I hope that Camp West, I hope things like that never go away, because they really do change lives. And those moments may seem like, oh, I go here every single year, this is boring, I do this every single year, but you don't know whose life is being changed in that moment.
Exactly.
Were there times that you felt afraid or doubted that things would get better? How did you deal with those moments?
Yes, there was many times, especially before senior camp. I believed in the preaching, but I didn't really apply it to my life. I believed. I knew that it could, but because I wasn't actually putting in the steps to change my life, it wasn't happening. You gotta actually put in the work to get the reward. And so I wasn't doing that, and so I really doubted in God. For a long time, I even doubted that God was real. Even after senior camp, for a really long time, actually, I doubted that God was even real. And so yes, there was many times where I didn't believe that my depression would go away, or I would feel happy again. For so long, I would wake up with no really sense on living,
Yeah.
I didn't have suicidal thoughts, thank the Lord, but I didn't really see the point in life. I was just so deep in my depression and anxiety and just addiction that I really didn't think there was a way out of it. So yes, there was many times that I doubted that God could take it away, but God really went up to me on that.
Yeah.
What was the second one? How did I cope?
How did you how did you deal with those moments?
Yeah, to deal with that, when I was more saved, I wasn't really fully saved until, after everything, but when I was more saved, I guess you could say, I really leaned on God, and there was a lot of self-doubt and a lot of self-pity that I felt. Yes, I'm asking God for all of this, but I'm not putting in the work, because I didn't know how to get out of my addiction. But before that, I really leaned onto myself, and that got me nowhere. That really, I didn't know where to lean onto. I couldn't lean onto my mom. Again, she was an alcoholic. I couldn't lean on God because I didn't really know of him,
Yeah, exactly.
So I kind of leaned on to the world, which is not a good way to do it. That's just the only way that I knew how, and was taught by society. So I don't recommend that. Lean on to God. He's the real healer.
And I think that's the problem with nowadays. When we find the light, we just hold on to it, but we don't realize that there are other people. Like, we always hear it preached, like, oh, go spread the gospel. But sometimes you're like, okay, well, it's fine. Like, I'll just hold on for me. And you don't realize that there's people out there who don't know God, and they don't know if he's real, and you could be the answer, going and being like, hey, like, God loves you. And even I've heard pastors say it multiple times, like, he's felt God being like, hey, go tell them I love them. Like, even if it's just they've been dealing with suicidal thoughts or depression or anxiety, just hearing those words, like, from someone can be so impactful, because in that moment you're just thinking, like, nobody loves me. But when they say God loves you, like, there's a change and a shift that happens.
Yes.
And that kind of leads into our next question, so that was perfect. What would you say to someone listening right now who feels like they're too far gone, too broken, or like their story is over?
It's not. You're not too far gone. You're never too far gone for God. Just lean on to God. And I know that's so cliche. Everybody says that. Lean on to God, but it's so true. That's what I did, and it got me where I'm at. And I leaned on to God even when I didn't believe he was there. And I just really trusted, and with the little faith that I had, the Bible says that you have to have a mustard seed faith, which is, a mustard seed is tiny. So that little bit of faith that I held on to, and I used it, and it helped me get through. And just lean on to God and his word. And even if you don't have other people, if you do, lean on to other people. I've found out that leaning onto the church and the people of the church really, really helps. And again, everybody says that, but it's so true.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, lean on to God or another figure in your life. But I will say it is really hard to fully lean on to God when you're leaning on to the world itself, and you're leaning on to other people who don't believe in God or aren't living faithfully, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I say the number one person to lean on to is God, because he's basically got everything. He's got everything that you ever need, but people don't. And again, I'm not saying don't lean on to people, but
Yeah.
your first priority should be leaning on to God.
I agree. Because I think that sometimes we think like, oh, I can get myself through this. Like you said, like you lean on yourself and you lean on the world because you don't know anything else. Or you think like, oh, well, God's just going to tell me that I need to fix myself. And a lot of times people don't want to fix themselves. They would rather go and blame every other person around them and be like, it's your fault this happened to me. It's your fault. But God is telling them, hey, you need to go and you need to sit down and you need to discipline yourself, like Brother Chad Scott was talking about tonight.
Exactly.
He talked about how you need to discipline yourself, how your priority should be the altar, and how you should be going there and building an altar for your family, for yourself, for your church. You should be able to discipline yourself in order to do those things. And so I think that's very important, and a lot of people don't understand that. They think, oh, well, I go to church, I get baptized, I get the Holy Ghost, that's it, I'm done, I'm good. But there's so much more, and I think that's something that we don't always understand.
Yes.
Getting free isn't always instant, and we all know this. What was the hardest part of fighting through addiction and choosing to walk with God?
Sorry, can you read that again?
Yeah, no, you're fine. What was the hardest part of fighting through addiction and choosing to walk with God?
The hardest part for me, it was, of course, the act, the feeling that I got. I just got peace, and I felt more like myself, because at this point, you really lose yourself in addiction, or not addiction, well, yes, addiction, but in depression and anxiety and these thoughts, you really lose yourself in it. And that was the only time, smoking weed was the only time I really felt like myself. And now I know that's not myself.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was the closest thing I got, and it was just that security that when I get home and I had a really stressful day, I can just go smoke.
Yeah.
And close friends of mine, they would come over really often and we would smoke, and it was our way of connecting. And she was honestly all I really had, other than, and again, my mom was out of her alcoholism.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Addiction, yeah.
Yeah. But so I had her to lean on to, but she was the other person, not going to say who, but she was the other person who I had to really lean on to, and we would used to smoke, and we had a lot of really good memories smoking, and it was really hard for me to understand that you can have those good memories and those fun memories without sinning, without
exactly.
smoking weed and doing bad things, you know. And so I didn't really have that understanding. I thought, oh, I'm losing this person, I'm losing our connection and our friendship and whatever, with when I'm having to put the weed away. So it was really hard for me to kind of understand that.
Yeah, and I think relationship is a lot. A lot of people don't want to let go of their addiction because they're like, but that's what I do every Saturday or every Friday. We go to the bar together, we hang out, we drink, we do all this stuff. But they don't realize that they're being pulled in by a lie. And a lot, like you said, a lot of people think like, oh, well, if I let go of this, I can't do that anymore. Like, I can't have fun. But I think sometimes being sober is more fun because then you remember. And I feel like even when you have those, I think that it's important to know that you can have good memories and all that. But like you said, not sinning. Like, there's certain things that are harder for people to let go of, like relationships that would be lost, and other things like just material things, because I know that a lot of people in my family have just struggled with addiction, and it's something that we always pray for them about because we know what it does to you. Like, it completely changes you, and you think like, oh, this is all I need. Like, I just need this, I need this. But it's not. It's really not.
You don't need it.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's something God is doing in your life right now, and what's next for you in this season, or what do you feel like is next?
What's
No, you're fine. What's something God is doing in your life right now? We'll start with that question.
Something God's doing in my life. Well, God's done a lot in my life. It's a kind of loophole of answers, I could say. But right now, He's really speaking to me in reading the Bible. Because for a long time, I just haven't really picked up the Bible. I've, read a few books here and there, but I just haven't really sat down and really read and studied the Bible, and He's really speaking to me in that, because it's just been really heavy on my chest that I haven't been reading the Bible and I haven't had the want. And so I finally was like, you know what, I have to do it. So every night I read at least one chapter, and He's really helped me to heighten my faith with that, because I've been a little stuck recently. And this is literally tonight will be the 5th or 6th night that I've read the Bible every night. So it's literally just started. And before that, I just was really stuck with how I felt in my faith. I felt good, everything's good. I didn't feel sad, but I just felt stuck in my relationship with God. I wasn't getting worse, but I wasn't improving. And so I finally was like, you know what, enough is enough. And I really need to strengthen my relationship with God. So He's really helping me to do that. And so I'd encourage you to pick up your Bible and read your Bible at least one chapter a night, because literally this is the 5th or 6th day I've done it, and I just feel so on fire for God, and I haven't really felt that in a while. So.
And I think that goes back to the discipline.
Yes.
When you discipline yourself to do hard things, you're denying your flesh, and it causes you to want to do greater things, because even just reading, honestly, if a chapter is a lot, read a verse. One verse is good. You can find a little devotional, read it. It will help you with so much. It will just help you get your day started. I read my devotionals in the morning, and I do my prayer in the morning, because it just helps me start my day, so I'm not sitting there oh my gosh, I had a terrible day. It just clears my mind, gives me peace. Even before this podcast, I was like, you know what? We need to just be lift everything, because it was a little stressful, just a little bit. But I think that God has really done a lot in Ava's life, and I'm so happy that you got to be in this. I did want to ask you one more question. What was it? Sorry, I had it in my mind. So when you were... Was it hard for you to understand why we as Pentecostals did what we did? When you first came in, what was your first impression?
Yes, I grew up in Pentecost. I went to a different church. I wasn't really in it. I just went to church with my grandma. And they didn't really explain to me why they did it. They just kind of made it a standard and made it known that you have to do this, but I wasn't ever really explained to why we did it. And I mean, there's a lot to be said about that whole situation. But so coming to this church, my mom grew up Pentecostal, full Pentecostal growing up, and she backslid when she was 18 because she was forced to do it. And so my mom never wanted me to be forced to live for God, which I'm really grateful for, because I found God myself. But it was really difficult for me to understand why we wear the skirts and wear the dresses and don't wear makeup and don't cut our hair, because in the Bible it doesn't say to wear dresses. So I'm like, well, if it doesn't say it, why are we doing it? And then I realized we do it to be set apart and for the discipline of it, I knew about, I was, thank God, I was explained to why we did the things that we do here, but it took me a while to realize that it actually does make a difference. We don't just do it because we have to. It actually helps our faith and helps us, helps to uplift our faith and our connection with God. And it's not just a standard. So it was difficult, but I got through it. And also, I'm really grateful because it's not that people were telling me to do it. And it was just God convicted me of those things and told me that I have to do that. Not that I have to do it.
Yeah,
because we can do whatever we want, but it's better to do it. And that's why God's so good, because you don't have to go and tell everybody you have to wear skirts, you have to do this. God convicts us on his own because he's so good. He knows exactly what we need to hear, when we need to hear it. So being an example, which everybody here did, was an example to me, kind of showed me, and then through God, of course, this is why we do it. And then, you know, God kind of did the rest of that.
Yeah, that's really good. I do have to say, I grew up in Pentecost, so I know, like, for me this is normal, but I know I've brought friends to church and they've been like, what in the world is going on? Like, this is so weird. Or I'll go to school and they'll be like, okay, why are you wearing skirts all the time? Like, we do wear uniforms at my school, so that's a little bit different, but I have been to, like, out of uniform events, and they're like, why are you still wearing a skirt? Like, it's 100 degrees, what are you doing? And so I'll explain to them, I'll be like, I wear this because I am, I explain to them, I wear this because I am trying to be a representation of God, and God didn't create me so I could go and show off my body for all these people.
Yes.
And we kind of talked about this. I talked about this with Lily a little bit in our last podcast about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. And those are all things that God says are evil and that he hates and that are just sinful. And so why would I want to entertain that?
I did want to add one thing that is a little bit about my testimony, and that this church has done the opposite of, which I really loved. So, at my old church, I went there, I wore pants, I wasn't really an apostolic Pentecostal, and that's what the church was. It was Pentecostal apostolic. And I wasn't really Pentecostal because I wasn't taught to be that. Again, my mom didn't want to force it on me, so she didn't really teach me those
Values.
And neither did my grandma or anybody at the church. They just kind of judged me for how I was, and I guess that I wasn't changing, even though you're not telling me why to change. You're just setting a standard and expecting me to follow it. And at this point, I liked both genders. I liked boys and girls, and so I had like a pride flag on my shoe, like that I just drawn there. I was 11 at this point, and I was at the front of the pew, the very front, and basically the pastor, he called me out and said, I don't exactly remember what he said, but he said, like, we all know the rainbow is for one reason, and you know, Noah's Ark and stuff, and the world uses it for other reasons. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he pointed at my shoe and was like, and see, we don't want to be like her, or we don't want to be like the world, like her shoe, and called me out on it.
Wow.
He's a Pentecostal apostolic preacher. And I went home crying. Also, there's no adult here, by the way. I was dropped off. So there's
no one to like stand up and be like, hey, like, what are you doing?
So I went home crying. My mom called the pastor. He didn't answer. Called the pastor's wife. She basically proceeded to tell her that I was no longer welcome, that they didn't want me there, and that's best to just keep me home, and a lot of other mean stuff that I'm not going to go into. And so that basically was my church hurt, as they like to say. And yeah, I just really love how this church didn't do that. And not that they didn't call me out, but just that they didn't just force a standard and expect me to follow it, and didn't judge me. Like, I went to church in pants for a hot minute until I went to senior camp, and that's when I went home and changed and threw away everything, threw away all my makeup and my wardrobe. And nobody judged me. They didn't look at me different. They didn't not talk to me because I looked different, because I was in pants. And they had so much love for me, just like I was any other person. Like, I was a human, and they didn't look at me different. And I just really love how the church helped me to get through that church hurt, because I was really, and I had been going to that church since I was 5, mind you. You would think they would know better, but they didn't. And so I just thank this church for not doing that and not judging me, and just loving me and welcoming me with open arms. And so if your church isn't doing that, find a different church. I'm sorry to tell it to you this way, but it's true. If your church is anything like my other church, then don't go there. So I just really appreciate that this church did
and
that.
I think that's one thing that I know Pastor always talks about. He's like, hey, like, when people come in here, they're broken just like you. They are just wearing different stuff. Like, they're trying to hide it as just because you're wearing a fancy dress or you're wearing a nice suit doesn't mean you're any less human than everyone else in the room. And so I think that is one thing I do have to say. Our church has always been like, hey, like, let's go and greet these people. Like, hey, I remember my parents would be like, hey, look, there's someone new here. Like, go talk to them. And as a young person, I was like, I'm not talking to them. I don't know them. They're not my friend. But I realized that, no, they need someone to pull them out, because when are we gonna have a connection? Why would they come to our events, or why would they come to church if I never talk to them, if I never outreach?
Exactly.
Thank you, Ava, so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. This was another good testimony. I hope you guys will join us next time for our next one, and we'll see you later.